Morning guys. Well, this is my third attempt at doing this video. I had to decamp downstairs because gardeners turned up next door, and then my daughter got up, so here we go. She's gone for a run with the dog, so I'm not going to rush. Right, a few weeks ago I was looking for a grotto in Battersea Park, and I found a lot of references to it being sort of like a system of caves with a lot of special effects, and I became quite fascinated with grottos. Well, I am with grottos and what was going on. This is supposed to be the Schweppes grotto in Battersea Park in 1951 when it was the Festival of Britain, but this looks like a much older illustration. And then I noticed that Charlie Jeans has also found a grotto in Melbourne behind the government house. So these grottos were very sort of popular sort of like places. Now I'm doing a lot of research on France, and I found this. Now this place is called Hesdin, and apparently there were, if I nip back to the beginning, this is because I was nipping through it earlier, this is an entrance into this, well, it's a grotto, but it's massive, and it says that it was built in the 1500s. I think that's the first bit. Hang on, there's a little bit of text. Yeah. Sacred monsters of the forest or garden. Italian, Sacro Bosco, Parco di Mostri, in the village of Bomarzo. So this is Bomarzo. Okay. So, and I found all these references to this place called Hesdin as well. See this? So this is the Italian one. It's 24 pictures. I'll nip through them quickly and leave the link because it's fascinating. They remind me a little bit of the dinosaurs in the Crystal Palace. Wow. There's a mythical monster with a tail. So there's a lot of these sorts of locations. Look at this here, that have got these sort of like fabulous grotto places. And then I found this about this place called Hesdin, and they're talking about automata, and the first automata, actually or apparently self-moving manufactured objects, most often in the shape of animals or people, built in Europe, were located in the park at Hesdin, a chateau in the county of Artois, near the current border between France and the Netherlands. These automata were built at the behest of Robert II, Count of Artois, in the last decade of the 13th century. Hesdin was famous for its automata until the estate and the automata fell into disrepair in the late 15th century, and then were later destroyed by English soldiers in the 16th century. So they tried to update them, but they couldn't really ever get them going again. The usual sort of story with this stuff. But it says an Italian knight, Renaud Quanet, whom he named guardian of his lands, and he placed him in charge of the renovations. So he enlarged the park, repaired the walls around it, and began to oversee construction of the buildings. Near an artificial lake there was a house around which were several pavilions, the Gloriette, a chapel made of glass, and the Gallery of Delights. Part of the gallery consisted of a bridge over the lake. The bridge was adorned with 6 groups of monkey marionettes. Additionally, there were mechanised fountains, a large sundial supported by lions and wild men, and a bellows-operated organ. Household accounts from 1294 to 95 detail payment to labourers for their work on the Park of Hesdin, including working for plumbing on the mechanised fountains. Tailleurs de coutel, or metalsmiths, were paid for work done to the bridge of the pavilion, for a moving and mechanised boar's head on the wall, and for work done on the imagnettes. The mention of these imagnettes strongly recalls the automata images in romance, chanson, historical chronicle, and epic, yet it is unclear what the imagines really were, as the word can refer to a moving or a non-moving statue. In the records of 1300, this is when the cathedrals were supposed to be being built, isn't it? 11, 12, 13, and yet they're making marionettes for gardens? It is not entirely clear what was meant by horloge, given that mechanical clocks had not yet been invented. It could be a reference to an elaborate water clock with automata, or perhaps in conjunction with the sundial. Right, okay, so when I think of automata, or when I thought of automata, I thought of this sort of thing, you know, the sort of thing that you see, amazing little French marionette type puppets, monkeys with cymbals and playing pipes, and there's even a very, very fine motor skilled automaton that can write. So they were very finely made, but they go back. It's not just about the 17th century, 15th, 16th, 17th centuries with these things. So, automatons in Greek mythology. So the Greek god Hephaestus was the god of metallurgy. He was supposed to have built automatons to work for him in a workshop. He was said to have made metallic statues of animal, men and monsters. Talos, perhaps his most well-known mechanical man, was a bronze giant named Talos. In the story Argonautica, Talos guards the island of Crete by tossing boulders at any unfriendly ships that approach. The legend has it that Talos had a vein that ran through his body, filled with a blood-like fluid and sealed with a nail. When the nail was removed, the fluid ran out and Talos was destroyed. That's the film, the Jason and the Argonauts, which was one of my favourite films when I was a kid, shows that happening. It's amazing. I love that film. So, did these things actually exist? The golden tripods of Olympus. The hippoi kabaroki, 4 horse-shaped automatons crafted by the god Hephaestus out of bronze to draw the adamantine chariot of his 2 sons, the kabairoi. The kabairoi rode out in a car of adamant, a pair of colts beat them. I mean, automaton, yeah? So here's the records. The first mechanical bird. Archytas made the first mechanical bird. It could fly about 200 metres. And then they started to they made a repeating crossbow, escapement mechanism. Its construction is similar to that of clocks, so it indicates that such escapement mechanisms were already integrated in ancient water clocks. So this guy, allegedly in 285 to 222 BC, made an alarm clock. It's compressed air, primitive form of cannon operated by compressed air. The Antikythera mechanism, which I think that might be a working model of our construct, to be honest, in its day. So, lots of descriptions. A collection of war machines, a description of war machines which enable wonders in tempers by mechanical or pneumatic means. That's automatic opening or closing of temple doors, statues that pour wine, etc. Mechanica, preserved only in Arabic, written for architects, containing means to lift heavy objects. So this is starting to come together for me, because if they were applying mechanics to inanimate objects and creating automata, and there's a reference here to something called Mechanica, written for architects, it seems to me that there were mechanical means to build these cathedrals. They had mechanics. Steam turbine, hero engine, a mechanism driven by steam, water pumps, A statue that poured wine. He is said to have made an automata maid that would fill a cup with a mixture of wine and water when the vessel was placed in her hand. Wind-operated pipe organs. This is all ancient Greece. Power supply for the wind-driven organ relies on the transfer of motion from the broad arms, like the sails of a windmill, to the piston mechanism. And there's a huge description of how it works. First automatic vending machine. First programmable mechanism. Constructed a cart with rope wrapped around 2 independent axles with a falling weight to provide power. Schematics for automatic doors. Odometer for indicating distance travelled by a vehicle. Bottomless wine glass, and then automata after the Greeks. Let's go back to here. So, the French philosopher René Descartes was reputedly fond of automata. They inspired his view that living things were biological machines that function like clockwork. So, talos again. And here's one of these mechanical statues with its internal workings. 19th century engraving of a hero of Alexandria's 1st century AD puppet theatre. Now, I'm a real big fan of this. I think this is the one. Is it this one? Is it this one? Is it this one? I haven't even saved it now. Well, I'll find it at the end. I've been sort of like looking at the London theatres and wondering just what was going on in there before. Actually, I will find it because I'd like to show it to you. Can't be far. Here it is. Baron Munchausen. This is my favourite scene in the film. This is where the actual theatre act changes and becomes like a brothel that he walks through. It's awesome. And all these moving parts on the stage. See moving. These are rods that turn. They're like turning rods. So I think that all these theatres around London and other places were always theatres, but these were the sorts of spectacles that were put on. I think they were like mechanical shows with all this sort of incredible stuff going on. And before that, there was all this. Classical stories reveal how, then as now, humanoid machines were mostly conceived as representing straightforward hopes. The ideal servant who always obeys, the perfect soldier who never tires. But as the influence of Greece declined, the West entered a millennium in which the skills of automaton making were lost, along with the aspirations associated with them. Here we go. 13th century saw a resurgence of Western interest. Automata began appearing at courts as showpieces designed to wow visitors. The Count of Artois at the Chateau of Hesdin, in what is now northern France, commissioned a cluster of mechanised beasts and androids that interacted with guests, scolding them and even soaking them with water. At the same time, hints of darker themes began to emerge. A number of great medieval scholars, such as Roger Bacon and Albertus Magnus, were each rumoured to have created a bronze head that could answer any question, a proto-Siri. There's also a reference to John Dee having built this scarab, a flying scarab, which actually flew around a theatre that he was doing one of these big mechanical shows in, and landed on somebody's hand, flew to a person. And it's also in the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, the same sort of mechanised, strange figures and all sorts of weird stuff. So the march of mechanical humanoids persisted into the great cultural and technological flowering of the Renaissance, evoking widespread wonder. Hydraulic, spring-powered and clockwork automata proliferated in Europe, from mechanised angels in churches to Neptune automata in grottos. There we go. Their mystical connotations began to give way to reflections of cutting-edge scientific developments. Leonardo da Vinci, for instance, drew up plans for a robotic knight operated internally by weights and pulleys. This guy could beat you at chess. I'll leave all the links for this because it's fascinating. Now we've done this one. Let's go back to here. Right. So there's lots and lots of information on this side about this place, this one here. But this is what's interesting. So this is a description of the site, the water animation features, the architecture, possible automata imagery, hydrological infrastructure and sculptures. Now this one was built in the 1500s, but it's the same thing going on. It's like fountains, statues, all sorts of stuff. Oh, it's just incredible. I'd love to go here. And then when you look down, Bomarzo hydrology, pipes, valves, sediment measurement, pressure, flow, control and cost. At this point the cultivated garden-informed reader's eyes may glaze over and a will to live feeling or lack thereof may develop. So this is the boring bit. Notwithstanding, the next section is unavoidable. Tivoli, Caparola, Bagnaia, none of these glorious works of water animated genius will be possible without pipes, valves, sediment management, water volume, flow control and so on. Exceptional skills and technology were enhanced and integrated in a mere century, sufficient to produce technological mastery, which with human creativity made possible artistic genius in water animated gardens. Reminiscent of Islamic and Roman achievements, humankind has never again reached such perfection, and we find it hard to surpass it in the future. So in Roman times, the standardization of pipe sizes, and now it tells you. I wonder if I can move this up a bit. That's better. They can see it a bit better. Sorry. So Florence, by the late 1560s, the famous Medici Garden. Florence was underway with its water animated elements, so these weren't just fountains. At Bomarzo town and Sacrobosco, the various uses to which water was put, drinking, public and private, washing, public and private, bathing, public and private, sewerage, public and private, fish ponds, open systems for events, lake, fountains, automata, jets and other maintenance functions all require different systems, setting tanks, turbidity reduction, purity, clarity, pressure and control mechanisms. So they had 4 basic choices: elm for major trunk lines and possibly ceramic. Elm tree boring machines are illustrated in various editions. Elm has the great advantage of not rotting if it sits below ground, in mud or in a waterlogged environment. Elm, yeah? For this reason it was a precious commodity, and elm trees with specific qualities were propagated, grown and cropped. Large straight trunks were especially prized since they could be cut into significant lengths. The longer the tube or pipe, the fewer the joints and the less risk there was of rupture or leakage. Elm pipes were shaped like modern pencils without a graphite insert, designed to fit sharpened end into receiving funnel-shaped rear end. Elm. Occasionally oak was used, but it didn't last as long. Special lead or mortar joint sleeve seals were used for high pressure ceramic lines. Lead quills, smaller sublines. So it's telling you how they did it. White ceramic pipes, and then it gets really sort of into this Drainage is important. So all of these amazing gardens that you see, like the garden in Versailles and Bomasco and Hesdin, had extremely complicated hydrology systems going on. And this is in the 1300s, guys. You know, this isn't I'm quite blown away by it. Major grooves cut into rock above water control booths, adjacent to caverns housing automata. Let's move down because it's got some pictures of some of the pipes that they found. I've read through this a couple of times, but I do sort of glaze over because it goes on quite intensely of how basic stoneworkers for cisterns, walls and working structures were almost certainly local tradespeople from Bomarzo. It must have been insane. They had processions and they had like these monkeys. Oh, here it is. Ah, this is about Hesdin. I knew it was here. Hesdin Castle was one of the favoured locations beloved of the Burgundy leaders from the 13th century onwards. In various entries between 1299 and 1344, significant payments were recorded for a number of repairs and enhancements of mechanical monkeys, soldering on engines de pavilion out in the park, repairs to machines ejecting water which had broken or been damaged in a rebellion, and a new engine which was replaced in the Gloriette, a tree covered with leaves among which carved and painted birds were perched, and lead pipes carried water to the birds which spouted like fountains. Okay, let's find this lady's lecture for you. This lady is an expert on ancient automatons, and this is absolutely fascinating, and it will change your whole idea of what was going on back then. And it explains a lot of these strange figures in some of these illustrations that are about statues that move, etc. They were automatons. So human figures, this is Hellenistic marionettes. So they'd have like a huge like stage or die which was pulled along by people, and this was pulled along by 60 men, and on it sat an image of Nysa, 8 cubits high, dressed in a yellow cloak. It stood up automatically without anyone touching it, poured milk from a gold libation cup, and sat back down again. And there was also a mechanical snail which moved by itself, leading a trail of slime. I'm a little bit suspicious about this. I think it might have just been a huge snail. Anyway, I'll mute her and play this a bit because I want you to look at this bit. You've got lots and lots and lots. She talks about Alexandria and the Romans and the Greeks and how this was an owl, a mechanized owl, and we're talking 13th, 14th century, again maybe even earlier. I think we're still way back here. And how the Romans, this was from Pompeii, how the Romans absolutely loved to highlight the difference between man and nature with their mechanized bits and pieces. So let's find, right, this lady here was on like a stage which was run by wheels, and they go into a very complex diagram up here of how it could move forwards, backwards, sideways, and even in a ziggy-zaggy sort of snake movement. But she'd be of her own accord, she'd be rolled into place, she'd move herself, there was a mechanism, and then when she was like in the place where people were going to watch her, she'd move about. She'd bend down, she'd drink from a cup, she'd touch her hair, she'd move her mouth, they're just incredible. And they were everywhere. Everywhere. So what else did I have here? Ah, yeah. So in the churches, right, we had this sort of stuff going on. A mechanical Christ on a crucifix, known as the Rood of Grace, drew great flocks of pilgrims to Boxley Abbey in Kent during the 15th century. This Jesus, which operated at Easter and the Ascension, was made to move the eyes and lips by strings of hair. Moreover, the Rood of Grace, was able to bow down and lift itself up, shake and stir the hands and feet, nod the head, roll the eyes, wag the chaps, bend the brows, and finally to represent the eye, but with the proper motion of each member of the body and a lively expression. So, having proven your clean life and innocence at the hands of a rigged St. Romwald, you could proceed to the mechanised Jesus. So before you went to the Rood, you went to St. Rumwald, which was a picture of a pretty boy saint. And this moved about as well. Dearie me. So mechanical devils were also rife. Poised in sacristies, they made horrible faces, howled, stuck their tongues out to instill fear in the hearts of sinners. They called them Satan machines. They rolled their eyes and flailed their arms and wings. Some even had movable horns and crowns. A muscular, crank-operated devil with sharply pointed ears and wild eyes remains in residence at the Castello Sforesco in Milan. And I found a picture of it. And there it is. So that would be in the church. A devil to scare you. And it's not a million miles away from this, is it? Seen this at Denver Airport, guys? Put a talking gargoyle up at the same time that Notre Dame burned down. And it says stuff to people. It says stuff like, "Welcome to Illuminati City." It takes a mick. I'd go crazy. If I saw something like that in an airport, if I talked to me, I'd probably push it off the bloody die. All grinning, "Oh, isn't it funny? Oh, yes, a gargoyle. Oh, idiots." Okay, get rid of that. And then we got this guy. This is pretty creepy. This explains so much to me. So all of these fountains and water features were actually really look at this. I think this guy's 15th, 16th century. Oh, strip down a bit so you can see how he works. So this is quite a basic one, and by this time they'd actually started to they'd lost how to do it. So originally they were made for one thing. In ancient Greece they were more practical automata, opening and shutting doors, operating pipe organs, water pumps, etc. And then it became much more about decorating and just adorning gardens. It must have been a little bit creepy. You'd be out in a garden and all of a sudden something next to you would move, and beasts, what crazy beasts, and all sorts of weird and amazing, wonderful things in the past. So yeah, automata. This place did the same. This had the same sort of thing going on. So there would have been statues and things stood on these places doing stuff. It's a strange old world, guys. Anyway, thanks for watching. And I'll probably continue with this because I started to look at it about 2 or 3 days ago. And yesterday was a sky day, so I didn't get anything done. and I wanted to get it done because I've got something else lined up to film, and I can't keep things hanging about for too long because I lose all the bookmarks and lose all my drift and always forget something to say. But I'm absolutely made up with this, and all this talk about these really old ancient ones makes me wonder about some other things that I will need an entire next video to talk about. So see you soon, guys, and thanks a lot for watching.